I think one of the reasons I've been able to build the community, I will never forget, I think it was 2011. I drove home to where I was born in the Eastern Cape, rural Eastern Cape. And I remember taking pictures. So I'd take a picture, this is where I used to go and swim in the river. That's where we used to, my grandfather's cattle, this was a kraal that we had, kept his cattle. There's a little dam that I used to swim in. That's where we used to graze, the cattle used to graze. And there's the hut that my grandmother used to tell stories in. And I'm posting these pictures, and I'll never forget, their response was incredibly overwhelming. It was on Twitter, before Instagram. And I'm like, and so many people said, oh my word, you are so real. You are so authentic. Or you've made me proud of my roots, about where I come from. I never told people that I came from the same background as you. And in my mind at the time, these responses surprised me, because I was like, but why is it a thing, right? It's where you come from. Like, it should not be a thing. But then the more I thought about it was that actually, had I not been relatively successful, I think at that time, would I have shown that part of myself? So I think it's easier sometimes when your life is a little bit better for you to share the struggles that you come from than to share the struggles at the moment, right? Because it's like, okay, fine. And I think it is a sense of hope, I suppose, that people sometimes get out of that, where it's like, oh, so there's someone else actually who's alive today. I'm not reading about them in some book who was alive 20, 30, 40 years ago, who's done this improbable thing, or like built a rocket to the moon. That sounds improbable. But here's someone who comes from a village who never thought that they could afford to buy a car, and they've got a car today. So it's the being able to relate to someone, I suppose, who is very much like you, who's tangible, who's not doing things that when I wrote my second book, to quote myself, when my publisher saw an interview that I had, and this interview was speaking about, how I grew up, and the fact that when I came to Cape Town to study here, I became homeless, and got into advertising, and I'm telling all the story. And then they saw the interview, they're like, oh my word, you've got a story. And it's like, no, I'm not. I was not in prison for 27 years. I'm not gonna be. There's nothing worth saying here. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not. I can't be writing a book. So like 2 years later, she wrote me another email, and she said, well, it's precisely because you're not in prison for 27 years and you haven't cured cancer. It's because your story is like thousands of other people, but it's just never been told. And you have this opportunity to tell the story, so you have to take the chance. You're robbing them of. And I was like, good grief, I've never thought about that. And then that's how I did that.